Cher leans back in her chair with her legs crossed. Her nails are shiny under the bright lights. She gives that famous smirk of hers. It's half like she's challenging you and half like she's making a promise. The interviewer clears their throat nervously and says, "Cher, you've been on stage with everyone. You've sung songs with famous people and been #1 on the music charts for so many years. Be honest, which singers did you have a crush on the most?" Her laugh comes out low and deep, making everyone in the room pay attention. "Oh, honey, you're asking some bold questions tonight, aren't you? You really want to know? Well, let me tell you, at 79 years old, I don't care about keeping secrets anymore." She flips her hair back and her eyes sparkle. "I've sung with the best singers, traveled on tour with the wildest people, gone to parties with the craziest celebrities, and sure, I behaved myself mostly, but let's be real. There were 7 men whose voices and whose, let's say, the way they looked on stage made me think about doing a whole lot more than just singing." She leans forward now. Her deep voice sounds smooth like velvet mixed with smoke. "These weren't just little crushes, darling. These were serious temptations. The kind that get under your skin while you're standing under the spotlight with sweat running down your back. Their voice in your ear, and you're thinking, if I don't walk off this stage right now, I might not walk off it by myself." Cher grins with a naughty look, holding up 7 fingers covered in jewels. "So, get ready because I'm about to tell you about the 7 singers I would have happily broken every rule for. And trust me, they all made me want to do more than just sing harmony with them." Before we get into the list, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more exciting old Hollywood news. Number 5 and 7 on Cher's list will really shock you and caught a lot of fans by surprise. She tells us some juicy feelings she's had for them. Very shocking. Without waiting any longer, let's begin. 1. Tom Jones. Cher smirks and shakes her head like she's telling the audience a secret she's kept for many years. Tom Jones. Oh my, that man wasn't normal. He walked into a room and it was like the walls moved closer just to hear him breathe. The hairy chest, the hips, that voice that sounded like velvet dipped in whiskey. I promise you women were throwing their underwear at him on stage. And I was sitting there thinking, move out of the way, girls. I'll throw myself if I have to. She leans forward and her voice gets quiet and husky. Tom was like pure wild animal energy. Every time I watched him sing, I thought, this isn't just music. This is like romantic stuff with a microphone. And when he looked at you, really looked at you, it wasn't polite. It was the kind of stare that undressed you one piece at a time, right there in the middle of a Las Vegas casino. And believe me, I would have let him. Cher chuckles in a naughty and unashamed way. We were both big stars performing in Vegas, running into each other at the same parties, the same dressing rooms, the same late-night wild times. He had that Welsh growl, that low laugh, and I'd catch myself wondering what it would sound like pressed against my neck at 3 in the morning. I kept it professional. I had to, but Lord knows I imagined plenty. Her eyes sparkle with mischief. I'll tell you something nobody else will. If Tom Jones had ever knocked on my hotel door after a show, I wouldn't have just let him in. I would have locked the door behind us, thrown away the key, and prayed the newspapers didn't find out until the morning. That man wasn't just a singer. He was like sin wearing tight pants, and I would have happily done it. 2. Elvis Presley. Cher's smile turns slow and almost dreamy as she says the name. Elvis, the king. My God, when that man walked into a room, the air just disappeared. He didn't walk. He prowled around like a cat. Tight jumpsuits, that curl of his lip, and those eyes that made you feel like you were the only woman alive. You'd swear he was singing just to you. And maybe he was. She leans back, fanning herself like she's too hot. Now, I never sang on stage with him the way I wanted to, but Vegas was a small place in those days. You'd see him backstage at a party, moving through a casino like he owned everything. And I'll be honest, I used to wonder what would happen if he pointed that famous finger at me and called me over. I'd have left footprints all over his house, Graceland, and I wouldn't have been ashamed of a single one. Her voice gets lower and more scandalous, almost like a confession. Elvis wasn't just sexy, he was dangerous. He had that mix of Southern gentleman charm and bad boy sin that made you want to follow him into trouble and pray you never found your way back out. When he sang Love Me Tender, I didn't want tender. I wanted wild. And Lord, he looked like he could deliver wild all night long. Cher shakes her head and her lips curl into a grin. I behaved myself, sure, but if Elvis had ever whispered my name in that low growl of his, I'd have forgotten every song note I ever sang. The king didn't need a crown. Being that tempting was power enough. 3. Mick Jagger. Cher lets out a deep, throaty laugh, almost like she's remembering something she shouldn't admit. Mick Jagger, Lord, that man was like chaos wearing leather pants. Everything about him was wrong in the best possible way. The lips, the walk, the way he moved, like sex itself had taken over his body. You couldn't be near Mick without thinking something wild, and half the time you wanted to act on it. She leans in, making her voice quieter and her eyes twinkle. The Rolling Stones and I crossed paths plenty back in the day. Parties, shows, late-night craziness. It was the 1970s, darling, and everybody was a little high on something. Mick would float into a room like he owned the night. Shirt half unbuttoned, hips moving like he just stepped off a stage. And when he looked you in the eyes, it was pure danger. Like he was daring you to ruin your reputation with him and promising you wouldn't regret a single second of it. Her grin turns naughty. I'll tell you, if Tom Jones was like velvet and Elvis was like fire, Mick Jagger was like dirty gasoline, just waiting for a spark. I'd watch him on stage with sweat dripping, lips curling around those song words, and I'd think, God help me. I'd let him wreck me and thank him afterward. He wasn't pretty in that polished way, but he didn't need to be. He was raw, untamed, and he knew exactly how to make women lose their minds. Cher's tone softens just enough to sound like a confession. I behaved, but with Mick, it would have only taken one look, one whisper, one stumble into a dark corner. And the truth is, I don't know if I would have walked away. 4. David Bowie. Cher's smile softens into something sly and almost respectful. David Bowie. Now that was temptation wrapped up in stardust. When we sang together on my TV show in 1975, I swear the air in the room changed. He had that man-woman thing. Beautiful and dangerous all at once. You didn't know if you wanted to kiss him, follow him, or just sit there and let him hypnotize you. Maybe all three. She laughs low, remembering. We did Young Americans together. And when he leaned in with that voice, half velvet, half electric shock, I thought, if this man whispers one song word in my ear, I'm going to forget every single harmony I know. He didn't just sing, he took over a room. And standing next to him, you felt like you'd been chosen for something secret and sinful. Her eyes flash with mischief. Bowie wasn't like the other men. Tom was raw. Elvis was fire. Mick was dirty trouble. But David, he was fluid, like seduction in colors you didn't even know existed. He'd look at you with those different colored eyes, and suddenly you weren't sure if you wanted him to mess up your lipstick or your soul. And the truth is, I wouldn't have minded either. Cher leans back and her grin spreads slow and knowing. There was this moment during practice where he brushed past me just lightly, almost nothing, and it felt like a lightning strike. If he'd asked me to follow him straight out of that studio, I would have gone. No hesitation. Bowie wasn't just a fantasy. He was temptation from another planet. And I'll admit it, I wanted to see where that spaceship could have taken me. 5. Rod Stewart. Cher lets out a wicked little grin and shakes her head. Rod Stewart. Lord, that raspy, scratchy voice of his could make even the most innocent song sound like a dirty offer. He had that rooster strut, the spiky hair, the swagger that said, I've already sinned tonight, but there's room for one more. And I'll tell you, more than once I thought about volunteering for that spot. She chuckles and the sound is rich and low. Rod was playful in a way that was dangerous. He'd flirt with you like it was as easy as breathing. Toss out some cheeky remark with that grin, and suddenly you were laughing and also imagining things you had no business imagining in the middle of a rehearsal. He wasn't polished like Sinatra or hypnotic like Bowie. No, Rod was raw fun. The kind of man you knew wasn't going to write you poetry, but he sure as heck knew how to make a night unforgettable. Her eyes flash with mischief and her lips curl slowly. I remember one night at a party in L.A. He leaned in close, smelling like whiskey and trouble, and said something in that gravelly voice of his. I don't even remember the words, but it didn't matter. The way he said it was enough to make me blush. And honey, I don't blush easy. Cher laughs, fanning herself with fake drama. Rod Stewart was temptation dressed in tight pants and a smirk. If I'd ever let him take me for a spin, I don't think either of us would have made it out before sunrise. 6. George Michael. Cher's expression softens and her tone dips into something more personal. George Michael. Now that man was pure silk, smooth, polished, and so darn beautiful it almost hurt to look at him. He had that voice, rich, tender, aching. Like every song he sang was a secret confession meant only for you. And Lord, there were nights I wished it was only for me. She smiles almost wistfully. We crossed paths at big charity concerts and music industry parties back in the 1980s. He had this feeling around him. Calm, almost shy, but with a heat underneath that made you wonder what he was holding back. When George smiled at you, it felt like you'd been chosen, singled out from the whole darn room. And when he laughed, honey, it was like being kissed without ever being touched. Cher's voice lowers and gets wicked. Now, I'll be honest. Every time I heard him sing Careless Whisper, I thought, sweetheart, there's not a thing careless about what I'd do if we were alone. He didn't need to grind on stage or strut around. His power was in holding back. That quiet kind of sex appeal that made you lean in closer, desperate to see what would happen if the control ever came off. She exhales slowly and shakes her head. George Michael was temptation in a nice suit. The kind of man who could ruin you with one look, one note, one touch, and I'll admit, if he'd ever leaned in whispering those song words in my ear, I wouldn't have lasted a second. He was smooth. He was sin, and he darn well knew it. 7. Bono. Cher leans back and her lips curl into that sly grin of hers. Bono. Lord, that man had fire in his veins. Every time I saw him, it felt like he was halfway between saving the world and setting your body on fire. The sunglasses, the leather, the swagger. He looked like a rock star and a preacher rolled into one. And honey, I wanted to be converted. She chuckles and her voice is husky. We crossed paths at those big benefit concerts in the 1980s and 1990s. He'd be on stage pouring his soul into a song, and I'd be standing off to the side thinking, if this man ever points those eyes at me, I'm finished. He didn't just sing, he commanded. Bono had a way of making every song word sound like it was meant for one person, and if you were lucky enough to feel it, you'd melt right there. Her look turns playful and almost like sharing a secret. What made him dangerous wasn't just the voice or the looks. It was the belief. Bono sang like he believed in every darn word. And when a man believes that deeply, you start imagining what it would feel like if he put that same passion into you. And let me tell you, I imagined it plenty. Cher lets out a laugh and shakes her head like she's scolding herself. I behaved, sure, but if Bono had ever leaned in after one of those shows, took off those sunglasses and whispered something low and rough in my ear, I'd have gone willingly. Angel or no angel, Bono wasn't just a crush. He was a temptation dressed in leather and fire, and I'd have happily burned.